So this is approximately 7:30 GMT on Tuesday, the 14th of September 2021. And we are doing the special editions. This is part A of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, Baby Angel Geronimo editions. And its main event in the contents of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel. We shall be, in part B, we shall be looking at the East London historic events that we have been discussing in previous posts and publications and statements. We have been discussing it for many years. The 100th anniversary of the particular group of councillors in London's Poplar Borough Council at that time, 1921. The Poplar Borough Councillors created a historic record by actually representing their electors, and a number of them, well, all the protesting councillors on the Poplar Council in 1921 were sent to jail by the then Conservatives. Of course, one of the councillors who has been more kind of mentioned than his fellow councillors, Poplar councillors, has been George Lansbury. George Lansbury then became the leader of the Labour Party, although for a brief period, but he did become the leader of the Labour Party. And the current Tower Hamlets Council is made up of the merged Borough Council of Poplar and the Borough Council of Stepney and the Borough Council of Stepney and Poplar and the Borough Council of Bethnal Green in April 1965. Now the details we shall be discussing in the context of what is happening in the current Tower Hamlets Council. Now back to the theme of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel editions dedicated to Baby Angel Geronimo. Now those people who have been able to witness and directly witness the various evidence of the behavior over the last 4 years of the UK central government department called DEFRA in the context of the plot, the conspiracy, the criminality aimed at Baby Angel Geronimo, will know that every single component of every single statement made by DEFRA against Baby Angel Geronimo has been a lie. And the fact that it has been a lie has been understood, perceived in ordinary language, in ordinary perception, an ordinary understanding, an ordinary sense that lie or lying is or are used in ordinary communications in the United Kingdom. Anyone watching this, whatever time and whatever date they're watching this, just a reminder, this is being broadcast live on the Tuesday, 14th of September 2021, and this is part of the continuing editions dedicated to the defense of the baby angel Geronimo. Now, people who have been made aware of the criminality, the cruelty, illegality, and the sheer evil package confected by the UK government department called DEFRA and via DEFRA. The evil has been known to members of parliament, and the evil has been made known to people that are not necessarily part of the, or have not been necessarily parts of the DEFRA bureaucracy. But they have been made aware, and there have been people in positions of elected responsibility and duty that they have owed, and they owe to baby angel Geronimo. People like the local councillors in Gloucester South, and the people like the local MP, whose formal constituency covers baby angel Geronimo's home in South Gloucester. Those people have been made aware by letter, by text, by email, by phone calls, including some of them have been made aware in person-to-person communications. And that is Gloucester and Gloucester South, which is located what is called the west of England, not far in kind of contextual international distance terms, not far from Bristol. Bristol, of course, is a well-known kind of name that has been on the map because of the location of the port and the role it has been playing, or it has played as a port for the slave trade. Now, all the concepts of justice and fairness and universality and compassion have been put before the elected post holders, both in the Gloucester area and also in the rest of England and rest of the UK. Many of the members of parliament have been made aware of the criminality and the sickness of DEFRA, in DEFRA, at DEFRA, via DEFRA, and the sickness that has been condoned, endorsed and peddled as a virtue. Sickness peddled as a virtue by Boris Johnson and his cabal. And Boris Johnson, in effect, has been complicit. So far, he has been complicit with the plot, the criminal plot against the most innocent being and the healthiest living being for the last 4 years. The healthiest living being that has been standing and running and being cheeky within the limits of the confined space that he has been unlawfully and illegally and corruptly forced to be limited to. Now, the story of the criminals targeting the most innocent being, the healthiest being on the planet, targeted over 4 years, is bigger, deeper, and more significant than any other story, including the last few weeks. During the month of August, the varieties of scare, panic, horror reported by Fleet Street in connection with the evacuation from Afghanistan. Evacuation of the people that are of superior race. We shall come to the superiority of the race. When they say that some of the Fleet Street, like the Daily Mail and the Murdoch scum, they have made a particular case for the translators, the interpreters, the translators and the interpreters and the supporters of the British colonial imperialist military occupation of Afghanistan along with the USA. Now that is the superiority of British way of life, British culture, British values. Now remember, the Times newspaper, also owned by the dirty digger Rupert Murdoch, ran a front page saying that the criminal Robert Jenrick, but the Times didn't call him criminal, but I'm calling him criminal. The crook Robert Jenrick was preaching that Afghan migrants, even the ones that are accepted as almost equal to the superior British, Afghan migrants were to be put through courses in which they will be taught about British values and British culture. Take this in. Remember what I'm saying. I'm not making it up, all in the newspapers. And this is a program that is called World Exclusive Original Diagnosis of Fleet Street. And the Times newspaper ran that story about Jenrick saying that the Afghan migrants, the ones that are almost treated as equal to British, And there should be the Afghan migrants, says John Jenrick, should be taught about British values and British culture. Now, did any of the people who are not Afghans but of the Anglo-Saxon kind of backgrounds, who became aware, whenever they have become aware of the criminally intended, criminally confected, criminally manufactured, murderous errand aimed at the most innocent baby angel Geronimo, did any of those people think that this was British values and British culture? These were British values and British culture, or the package of attacks aimed at baby angel Geronimo was representative of British values and British culture. Because what we are doing in these editions called Justice for Baby Angel Geronimo, we are actually looking at length and in detail and factually and evidentially and historically and kind of topically at the criminals abusing their positions. And these criminals were abusing. So that raises the question, what is not abuse? What is the proper use of their positions? Either at DEFRA or including DEFRA and elsewhere. What was the proper use? What was the proper use of their positions in relation to their criminally intended attacks on baby angel Geronimo? What would be the correct use of the positions in accordance with the preaching by the proven crook, Robert Jenrick, what he was preaching to be British values and British culture? What is British culture? What are British values? What part of the DEFRA lies? What part of the DEFRA lies the criminal, untruthful lies by DEFRA against baby angel Geronimo? What part? Because the DEFRA liars invented right from the beginning, even before the beginning. Yes, even before the beginning, they started with a plot to conspire. With a plot to conspire any number of pretexts against baby angel Geronimo. The healthiest, the most perfect being targeted by the unhealthiest, sick-minded criminals that were defying not only the basic British values, but they were defying the basic values of care, compassion, honesty, integrity, tolerance and respect for life that is universal. And that is the most powerful set of values accepted, aspired to across the planet by the just-minded, right-minded, kind and compassionate people. So what was Generic doing at any stage in the last 4 years? What has he been doing? Generic, as a member of parliament, as a licensed law trader, what has been his British values and British culture based action opposing the criminals at DEFRA and defending and supporting the innocent baby angel Geronimo in the last 4 years? What has Generic been doing? Remember what I am referring to. Referring to Generic, the proven crook, preaching British values and British culture to be taught to the Afghan migrants. Now, Generic has been active as an elected post holder as an MP and active as a practitioner of licensed law trade. In both positions, Generic has been aware of the criminality, illegality, cruelty, and all of that intended by the post holders in DEFRA. So what has he been doing? The answer is nothing. In fact, the answer is worse than nothing, because he has been, like all the other MPs, complicit in the criminal plot against baby angel Geronimo, contrary to the law, contrary to all the other traditions of justice. So thus Generic is in post in the dark land because he is against universal justice. He has colluded and he is complicit. He remains complicit with the criminals at DEFRA. Now the Times today, Tuesday, the 14th of September, 2021, has got 3 leaders, that is editorial pieces. The middle one is child protection. Child protection is a buzz kind of phrase. Child protection is a buzz phrase because it is a slogan, as a propaganda. It's not a real reflection of the reality of the UK state, which is dark land. Most of the crimes committed against children within the church by the clergy of both main Christian denominations, and the abuse of children in the other faith groups, which are comparatively recent in the context of the history of the demography in this country. The Muslims and the Jews and other numerically smaller groups and faiths are also guilty. The leadership, the comparable kind of counterpart to the churches and the clergy. And they have been guilty of suppressing the evidence and the facts and the truth of child abuse within their groups, within their faiths. And this continues. And this is not, as I said, it's a buzz phrase, propaganda phrase. The child protection, the editorial, is not about child protection. It's about the propaganda, the narrative about vaccination. That is what it is. So the idea of anything that is kind of superficially attractive to the gullibles is what is being exploited here in the Times, typically. A buzzword, apparently catchy phrase, attractive phrase. But baby angel Geronimo has been denied all aspects of child protection. And the denial has been perpetrated by the inclusion of the colluder, the local MP for the constituency where Geronimo's home is. And child protection has been abandoned. The most fundamental, the basic test of health and the basic test of good health has been abandoned. The most scientific tests have been abandoned, denied, refused. And that has been done not in secret. That has been done in brazen openness, with the brazen, open criminal complicity and rubber stamping collusion with the criminals by the so-called judges. The three judges, the surnames Murray, Griffiths, and Stacey. These three judges abandoned the basic, fundamental core of judicial so-called independence, and they surrendered to the criminals' agenda confected by the DEFRA criminals. And no court in any part of the world, what the Fleet Street papers would call third world countries or developing countries. Third world is a corrupt, absolutely corrupt, racist, imperialist, inaccurate, false phrase, as is the word or phrase developing countries. It is like the racist, criminal, in denial, corrupt, attitude of Robert the Crook generic towards the Afghan migrants being in need of being taught about British values and British culture. Generic is not the only one. Michael the Crook Gove has been doing the rounds of the weekend. He has been surfacing as having joked about empire and racism. To him, racism is fun. As long as the racists can have fun by mocking and ridiculing victims of racism. Now that is, think about the values. If instead of racism, it is called murderous plot against a child, how would you see? Would that be acceptable? Because if a joker like Gove can joke about the pain and suffering and denial inflicted by racists on the victims of racism, what's the difference between Gove and those in Fleet Street that have peddled the lies of DEFRA against Geronimo, against baby angel Geronimo? What is the mindset? What values are those people practicing? What culture do they belong to? So what we are asserting on the facts is that there is no such thing as British values or British culture. There is only justice. Because those people who have been stunned by looking at the evidence of DEFRA's brazen lying against the innocent baby angel Geronimo have been forced to conclude that there is no such thing as British culture or British values. And what we have to decide as supporters of the concept of justice and supporters and defenders of baby angel Geronimo is to share this truth. Stop lying about British values and culture. Because look at their behavior. How many times has the DEFRA lying list been made available to the politicians, to Boris Johnson, and to others? How many times in the last 4 years? Is that reasonable? Is that a test reasonable that a victim, an innocent victim, has been crying for justice endlessly for 4 years? And England has been allowing the series of criminality to be confected and repeated and updated against the innocent baby angel Geronimo. Where is England? Where is the England of Robert Jenrick, who says that Afghan migrants should be taught British values and culture? Where have British values and culture been about baby angel Geronimo, who has been the target of the worst crime that can be imagined on the planet? The worst crime. The plot has been ongoing for 4 years, to murder the innocent after defaming him, libeling him, slandering him with accusations that do not exist, never have existed. What values? What culture? How dare the racist criminal crook, generic, preach British values and culture to Afghan migrants at a time which is almost 4 years or over. Ongoing conspiracy and criminality being perpetrated and hatched and cooked up by a government department in Britain, British government department, conspiring to murder an innocent baby angel Geronimo against all evidence, against all facts, against all pleas to reasonableness, all pleas to compassion. How dare this criminal, racist, preach British values and British culture when he is complicit with the conspiracy to murder an innocent baby angel Geronimo by the British government, of which he is a part. What British values and what British culture were the labellers defending in Manchester 200 years ago? Were they guilty when they were shot and they were killed because of protests for civil rights and liberties? Were they guilty of anti-British values because they spoke for democracy, liberty, free speech, and freedom to protest? Did the popular councillors commit a crime, or did they commit crimes by speaking for the people too poor to pay the high rates? So all supporters of justice for the baby angel Geronimo must feel absolutely, morally, ethically, universally in the correct company, in the correct position. If they don't support the right to justice, Geronimo, baby angel Geronimo's right to justice, then they will not have any freedom in this dark age and dark land that Johnson has lowered the country into. Evil land where there is no justice, where sloganeers for British values and British culture commit the crime of complicity with the very opposite of what they preach. And Generic has been preaching the opposite. And Generic is a sample. Now here is a piece in the Times today, which is page 22, which says Facebook lets the famous break rules. And it's a piece byline to Charles Maloney. And what it says is that Facebook has built a system that exempts high-profile users from some or all of its standards of behavior. Company files show. So that is worth writing a news item about. That is corruption by Facebook and criminality by Facebook, because the famous users, many of them, if not all of them, are also engaged in criminality. And the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Anglican kind of bureaucrat called Archbishop, he is an complicit arch in criminality of the UK state. He said that the parents who were protesting at Batley, outside the Batley school, grammar school, were wrong. And Justin Morally Wobbly issued that statement within, of course, almost 24 hours after the statement, identical statement had been issued by Gavin Williamson, who remains incumbent in the post of Secretary of State at the expense of education. Now, Batley and Span protesters, of course, didn't number more than maybe a dozen. The main protesters were Muslim parents and guardians. And they were protesting at that time against a reported reference by one of the teachers at that school to a photograph of the Prophet of Islam, peace be on him. Now, of course, this is not accepted because there is no picture of the Prophet. That is the thing. That is what they were protesting against. And they were protesting against that because that was not an original act by that teacher in that school. That was a reference by the teacher to a main event action by the journalists involved with the French magazine Charlie Hebdo, which was followed by series of violent actions, including murders of many of the journalists. Now, our position is that we don't support any of that whatsoever, but we do support peaceful protest, whatever the cause. We draw the line at completely clearly. We don't endorse, we don't condone, we don't support, we don't advocate any violence whatsoever. But we do support the right to protest. Justin, the racist, anti-Muslim, Wobbly, failed to make the point. Their parents, guardians were entitled to protest peacefully. And none of the protesters that Justin the racist Wobbly was condemning, none of the protesters at Batley had said anything that we can access. If they said something that we have missed, we'll duly update on that particular gap if that is the case on the facts. But as far as we can see, we could access, the parents were demanding action, including sacking of the teacher, which, as protesters, they were entitled to do. And so therefore, what Justin Wobbly has neglected throughout the last 4 years, that an innocent baby angel Geronimo has been targeted by murderers who are criminals. Wobbly has not issued any position statement condemning the plot to murder the innocent baby angel Geronimo. Now that is in contrast with the very common sense statement, although it didn't continue in the high profile position where it was originally published, the very common sense comment against the random murderous errand by Stanley P. Johnson. The absence of Justin Wobbly highlights the criminality of the church or the church bureaucracy, the criminality and complicity with the plot against baby angel Geronimo. So who are the people that have been standing up for baby angel Geronimo? And what belief or lack of belief or faith do they subscribe to? Regardless of what faith or no faith that they subscribe to, all the supporters of baby angel Geronimo are doing universal work, and they have been doing the work that God would approve of in any language, in any faith, defending the innocent. In all the languages, all the faiths in the scriptures, the innocent is absolutely unconditionally worthy of supporting unconditionally. And if it's an innocent child, and we call baby angel Geronimo a child in many respects, he meets the requirements of being a child, a baby, an innocent baby child, across the world, across all scriptures, across all definitions, across all known considerations of compassion and justice. Baby angel Geronimo has been deserving of the moral backing by the Archbishop of Canterbury. Why has this liar this liar been silent? And this particular kind of program, not this edition, but in the past we have diagnosed the corruption of the so-called Muslim religious leaders. That corruption continues, and our condemnation continues. And we condemn and point out all the other faith leaders that have been silent. About baby angel Geronimo. Now, would those criminals holding positions of what is called the clergy, clerical positions, would they be silent if one of their relations or one of their own children was being targeted by criminals intent on murdering them because the targeted child or children was or were innocent? Think about what we're saying about dark land. It's not just about the statement by this idiot. This is an idiot who is in the same cabinet of morons that the congenital liar Boris Johnson fronts. Teresa coffee. And Teresa is a poisonous coffee. Is a complete and utter crook and a personification of cruelty and criminality aimed at the targets of the crimes and criminality of the nasty, evil regime that she is part of. Now, anyone with any sustained memory politically about the previous incumbents in the post of the so-called Secretary of State at the DWP, which is deprivation, want, and poverty creation. We don't accept on the evidence, on the facts, that it is Department for Work and Pensions. It's deprivation, want, and poverty creation. Anyone with any sustained memory of the British values and British culture of forcing people to commit suicide would know that Robert Jenrick is a criminal, as much in need of drastic action against him as is George Injustice at the DEFRA, which has been manufacturing criminality and criminal lies and untruths against the baby angel Geronimo. So you've got George Injustice, you got Teresa Coffey, you got Robert Jendrick, and you go back to the DWP in the worst kind of years. Ian Dracula Duncan Smith. Ian Dracula Duncan Smith is a personnel kind of crook as well as political crook. Personally, he has been kind of abusing the largesse given to him by his so-called father-in-law or in-laws. And he has been enjoying very luxurious housing. I mean, Ian Dracula Duncan Smith has been doing all of that, indulging, while he has been forcing people in poverty to experience the most terrible frustration and helplessness and desperation that have caused them to take their own lives. The idea was to cause such suicidal consequences, feelings in them. Now, if the similar policy is allowed to be adopted and practiced against people in the lowest incomes and the most vulnerable positions, then it defies the capacity of imagination, the impact on a child, innocent child being targeted for murder in Britain by the British government. Robert Jendrick, the proven crook, thinks it is absolutely in accord with the British values and British culture, which is why he has been complicit as a member of cabinet where George Injustice sits in DEFRA's murderous plot against baby angel Geronimo. So any genuine interpreter sitting in a position as a judge, any genuine interpreter of the Magna Carta of 1225, any genuine interpreter of the Magna Carta, paragraph that we have been quoting from the judgment of the Supreme Court, within quotation marks, published on the 17th of January 2017, any judicial interpretation or any judicial interpretation by another judge other than a judge of the Supreme Court, any judicial interpretation of that in relation to the facts of the behavior of DEFRA would find that DEFRA was committing absolute wanton crimes against the written law, as Fawn Hall remarkably put it. Fawn Hall was, of course, the private assistant to the Colonel Oliver North during Ronald Reagan's reign as President of the United States. When Oliver North featured as Reagan's authorized criminal to break the published vows against Iran and North Korea. Because Oliver North was authorized by Reagan to do the dirty things and lie at large while breaking the so-called public sanction against Iran, breaking the sanction and supplying or being complicit with the sale of arms through Latin American country to Iran, which Reagan had been on the record persistently as referring to as one of the Looney Tune countries. One was Iran and the other was North Korea. Now, what is happening in the context of the state breaking the rules? Remember the piece, the 2nd of September piece by I. Stephanie Boyce, the current president of the Law Society of England and Wales. Her piece in the Financial Times, whoever wrote it, it was her kind of byline, recognized the breaking or the breaches of the basic rules of law or rule of law and due process by the UK state. So it's not an accidental reference that we are making when we are condemning the criminal collusion with the law-breaking record and behavior by DEFRA against Baby Angel Geronimo. It's on the record. Even other people like I. Stephanie Boyce, president of the Law Society of England and Wales, is alarmed at the breaking of the law, rule of law, by the UK state. UK state. That's what has been happening. And the breaking of the law has been being committed by the UK state with the open participation of the self-confessed promoter of British values and British culture, Robert Jenrick, the criminal. So on the list of criminals who must be indicted for their crimes against Baby Angel Geronimo over the last 4 years is Jenrick. The entirety of the cabinet is guilty. Because if we look at the list of the lies that Priti Patel has been mouthing against the ordinary asylum seekers and the migrants, you can see that she is following the same assertion of racist superiority of British values and culture as have been proposed and promoted by the liar Robert Jenrick, despite the fact that Patel is herself a child of migrants, asylum seekers, refugees, call them whatever, when they came from East Africa. After the East African regions or regimes decided to declare a policy of ousting mainly Asians, mainly of Indian origin. And Priti Patel's parents got an asylum in this country from Africa. What would happen if Priti Patel's parents were refused because they didn't have British values or British culture, or didn't show evidence of being practitioners of British values and British culture? These are in breach. The criminality against baby angel Geronimo has been brazenly committed, perpetrated against the UK's international law obligations as well as being in breach of the UK's obligations under the domestic acts of Parliament and against domestic common law precedent. But as it is dark land, none of those things are deemed to be within the frame of British values and British culture. Anything goes. So Robert Jenrick and George Injustice and Boris Johnson, strictly on the facts of their behavior, and Priti Patel and Grant Shapps and Dominic Raab, strictly on the evidence of their behavior and their conduct, should be sacked and then prosecuted. Sacked for criminality and criminal breaches of the law or breaches of laws, both domestic as well as international. So they should be sacked for crimes against the law, crimes against justice, and they should be prosecuted. But of course, they won't be sacked and they won't be prosecuted. But that's the least that can be done and should be done and should be aimed to be done against them for their crimes and their breaches of the avowed standards of British values and British culture. This is the Justice for the Baby Angel Geronimo edition of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, being broadcast from London in the UK, defying the weight of criminality. Defying the weight of criminality embodied in the criminal personalities of the cabal of criminals constituting the brazen, law-breaking, criminally active, conspiring to attack the innocent baby angel Geronimo regime. And although the Murdoch scum is not admitting any connection, the truth is that all the other behavior, like this one that the Murdoch scum does admit, 1.2 million travel tests, Now, this is the kind of extension because they tested people for the COVID-19 variants and the result was zero, not nada, not a single one. So what they've been saying for the last 4 years against Baby Angel Geronimo is that Baby Angel Geronimo tested positive in that he tested as having in his body elements of the kind of disease, bovine tuberculosis. Now, all the rational, logical, scientific tests and criteria have been absolutely ignored by the criminals who actually conspired to infect Baby Angel Geronimo with a kind of temporary symptom that would register in a particular way. So he was not tested independently. He was tested by being artificially groomed to produce a temporary symptom of something. But it still didn't. It never did show that he had any illness. I mean, in the history of what terrorist regime can such conspiracy be found to have been in practice or being practiced? So the world's worst known regimes as at this date, we have no incident that we can actually refer to that resembles the length of lying and length of time that DEFRA has been spending in trying to justify its criminality against the innocent Baby Angel Geronimo. There is no incident that we can refer to at this time. If anyone watching this can find an incident, as we have said, our policy is to receive just the technical information in a direct message. No details, just technical reference if it is absolutely rock solid information. This is a child that they are going over the top to celebrate. The child they are celebrating. And the child, baby angel Geronimo, they have allowed to be targeted by the criminals at DEFRA. The criminals at DEFRA have been defying humanitarian, human beings making the pleas for baby angel Geronimo. Various descriptions in the Fleet Street papers and the mainstream media have, in effect, in the words that they've been using, describe baby Geronimo, baby angel Geronimo, as if DEFRA, the liars, have targeted him for some kind of crime. Baby angel Geronimo has not committed a crime, has not done anything wrong, and in the 4 years of his being targeted by the criminals has shown absolutely no sign of being in any way anything other than the best embodiment of a living being. So the details about his confinement in the farm only add to the fact that DEFRA has been lying. You go to the times periods of the most ruthless criminals in Egypt, and you go to any other countries since the Egyptian pharaohs, and you don't find the targeting of a child, innocent child, which is what baby angel Geronimo has been, by any of the ruthless criminals, regime, and gangs in power. So it's dark land that has allowed this. And you dig the past of the likes of Michael Gove, and you find that in one person, he's a pedophile. He boasted about pedophile. So there is a Lib Dem who is quoted as saying, Wendy Chamberlain, the Liberal Democrat chief whip, told the Prime Minister, that is Johnson, should consider whether this is the type of person, that is Michael Gove, that deserves to be sat around the cabinet table. However, given Boris Johnson's own history of disgraceful remarks, I expect this will be another shameful issue he lets go unchallenged. Now that's the Lib Dem. Lib Dems are not the most honest source for opinions, but even they cannot allow Michael Gove's comments to be left without any condemnation. And the fact that Michael Gove's condemnable behavior is accompanied by condemnation of Boris Johnson's disgraceful remarks shows that the darkness of the dark land regime is very much active and present and in power. which is why they've been attacking the innocent baby angel Geronimo and making excuses for lying against him because he is healthy, he is fit, and he's beautiful, and he's somebody that they have no actual truthful evidence against. So they've been lying, and they've been lying, and they've been lying, and they've been lying, and they've been going deeply into the darkness. As we have said, there is no way that the darkness can be ended without light appearing somewhere. No sign of light appearing via the remains of the Labour Party, which has been politically murdered by Keir Starmer. Now, Starmer was in post as the Director of Public Prosecutions. Starmer was in post, I think, between 2008 and 2013. When the 3 years, I think, from 2010 to 2013, when he retired, were dominated by the Tories. But the de facto Tories, like the Blair Brown regime, were the period when he got in as the DPP. Starmer was in post as the Director of Public Prosecutions when the massacre by suicide forced by Ian Dracula Duncan Smith on the poorest and the most vulnerable people. These people, absolute majority, were gullibles, white English people. So they were massacred by suicide that was forced on them as policy. So what did Starmer do to defend them? Starmer didn't do anything to defend them, to protect them. In fact, just before he stepped down after 5 years as DPP, Keir Starmer added his own criminal plots against the poorest and the most vulnerable. This is something that we have discussed many times before, and anyone watching this can look up Keir Starmer as DPP, Keir Starmer's sort of legacy at the Crown Prosecution Service. And they will find that Starmer was far more cruel than his predecessor, whatever the political leanings. Now, a lack of democracy and lack of accountability, lack of transparency is not an accidental absence. It is part of the kind of darkness and the evil culture to which these individuals belong and subscribe to. Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, Chris Grayling, Grant Shapps, Dominic Raab, Teresa Coffey, Robert Jenrick, of course, and George Injustice. So these are the people that are not only openly breaking the law, they are openly, routinely, daily breaching British values and British culture. So they are in the zone of darkness. And there is no respite from the darkness, because the criminals in power in the Darkland regime are actively pursuing their criminality and their violations and their violence against the innocent. If Starmer is the leader of the opposition, then of course that in itself, that fact in itself, is proof that there is no space for even talking about justice. There is no room for justice. There is no room for compassion. Because if there were any room for compassion, then Starmer would not have issued the criminal complicity statement supporting the DEFRA criminals' plots and lies against baby angel Geronimo. And there exists no sign that any other political source is around the corner that will surface and appear as the main platform for political office in this country. It's all dark. The Lib Dems, politically and socially and ethically and morally, don't really exist. And the Greens are completely in the dark, silent. And the Scottish contingent of MPs and the Palace of Westminster is too narrow-minded and too ignorant to merit being mentioned in the context of morality and ethics, let alone of justice. So the campaign for justice for baby angel Geronimo has to take into account all these colluders in the darkness and with darkness, and do something that brings an end to the darkness by asserting justice in an unprecedented moral, ethical, spiritual, universal way. And that assertion is only going to be done by the symbolic universal, evidential, factual, innocent embodiment and personification for the cause of justice, which is baby angel Geronimo. So stop this at about 1.5 hours, and we shall continue in due course.